We're actually kind of lucky this time because we've been given early access to this vehicle. And this vehicle, we firmly believe, will become a bestseller for Toyota in the US and Canada very, very soon. In fact, already, I mean, the paint is barely dry on these things that we've seen 2 or 3 on the road already. What is it? This is a 2022 Toyota Corolla Cross. When we think about this vehicle, and we can easily imagine that had Toyota introduced it, say 5 years ago, they would probably be the brand that's worth as much as Tesla is today. I mean, okay, so maybe we're exaggerating slightly, but the fact that this vehicle now exists makes so much sense that we kind of wonder why Toyota didn't introduce it years ago. But obviously they had a plan. I mean, the Toyota Corolla, this is the third and we assume final piece in the Corolla family for North America. A few years ago, Toyota introduced the hatchback to kind of mixed reviews in a number of ways. One, I mean, yes, it's a great driver, but two, it's not the type of hatchback that we're kind of used to, where there's an actual usable backseat for humans and a boot that can, you know, at least carry stuff from Costco, you know, like a 1 week's worth of groceries. But obviously Toyota had a plan, because here is the Corolla Cross. I mean, it's going to kill essentially all hatchback sales, we assume, because price-wise it's actually quite reasonable given everything else you get. I kind of gonna fast forward through a lot of this because we want to get this product or this content out really, really fast. So the review is going to be a little bit quicker than usual, but suffice it to say that so far we've only found one kind of quasi bug with the vehicle, and it probably has more to do with the people driving it than the actual 2022 Corolla Cross. So let's do that walk around and take it for a spin. Here we go. Okay, so the first thing you need to know, I just mentioned the Corolla hatchback. The Corolla Cross, the front-wheel drive base version, starts at about $3,500 more than the hatchback, which works out to $24,890. All-wheel drive is an option on all trims, and definitely if you live in Canada or above the snow belt, it's a well worth option for only about $1,800. Now the model you're looking at right here is the $33,990 XLE all-wheel drive vehicle. This is in fact the top trim for the 2022 Corolla Cross. Now as you're looking at the vehicle, there's something actually, I mean, the styling is very, how can I put it, regular, normal. And I think that makes sense because typically Corolla buyers are very conservative and good for them. But Toyota didn't leave it just at that, because there are in fact 24 little Easter eggs, if you will, all over the vehicle. For example, Corolla Cross in the lights, and there are a whole bunch all over the place. So I said 24. So far, we've found 16 of the 24, and this is a great game that you can actually get your kids involved in if you want to start opening doors and saying, "Hey daddy, look, I found one," or whatever. That's kind of funny. But again, about the design, I mean, obviously, clearly, because it's now a crossover / SUV, whatever you want to call it, it's just bigger, beefier, and stronger looking, but it's still very honest as a Corolla vehicle. I mean, yes, there's a lot more cladding all over the place, but everybody wants cladding on their SUVs today. Whether or not you're going to take it off-road, it really doesn't matter. Now, as we continue to walk around, maybe we'll find another. Oh, there's one right there. I think there's one at the bottom of the windshield over at the other end. Anyhow, I mentioned that the hatchback is kind of small as far as interior space is concerned. So if we come around and look at the hatch, and here's a nice touch for such a small compact crossover, is that you have a power hatch. So the trunk, there are two versions of the trunk, if you will, and it has to do with the all-wheel drive. With all-wheel drive, you're looking at about 700 liters of boot space, which is actually very accessible. I mean, it's wide, and there's kind of some little cubby holes under the floor. You know, nothing spectacular, but size-wise versus the size of the vehicle, it's actually really, really good. If you opt for a front-wheel drive versions, you get about 70 liters more trunk space, or maybe that's 60 liters. But still, this is pretty damn impressive. Now, if we go inside, and in the rear seat, as I kind of mentioned as well, the hatchback has next to no rear seat space. But this is a different story right here. And what's probably the best thing about this is now that the Corolla Cross is a little higher off the ground, the ingress and egress is child's play, literally child's play. Getting in and out, booyah. And there's, I mean, that's my driving position right there, and there's tons of leg room, there's plenty of headroom, and you can kind of squeeze 3 across if you really had to. But this is the Corolla that the people have wanted. And oh, just as a side note, I think we can say bye-bye to the CHR very soon, unless Toyota decides to introduce a GR version of that, which I wouldn't. Anyhow, in the front, look, the interior is typical Toyota. You have your touchscreen display, which just kind of juts out of the center console, the center stack. But everything else, the ergonomics are spot on. I mean, some of the, the layouts of the controls are a little bit weird, but that's really Toyota, and you really get used to it fairly quickly. There's plenty of spaces to, like little cubby holes to store your stuff. It just all works. It just all makes so much sense. And quite clearly, when you drive it too, this is when you realize that, yes, this is a Corolla, but this is not, there's no such thing as a cheap, basic mode of transportation anymore. And this is really impressive on the road. So it's that time right now. Let's go. So the drive. The thing is, what Toyota engineers have done is combine everything we really like about the current generation of the Corolla and just, well, essentially increase the ride height. That's it. There's nothing really crazy about that. That's just the essentials. The Corolla Cross, therefore, is built on the same TNGA platform, which means that it is extremely refined, quiet, comfortable, competent, just as much as the Corolla sedan and the Corolla hatchback. And the thing is, with a Corolla, no matter what version, with the possible exception of the GR hatchback, should Toyota ever decide to bring it here, which I really, really hope they do, you put yourself in the mindset of a typical Corolla driver. And this is actually more of what they want than possibly driving enthusiasts. But even driving enthusiasts can appreciate it, how well sorted and competent, as I just said, the chassis is. And the suspension works wonderfully. The steering responds nicely. The brakes are really, really good. It's quiet. There's a sense of solidity built in. And above all that is that you're actually sitting a few inches higher than you would in a regular Corolla sedan and hatchback. I mean, what more can you possibly want? The only engine available in the Corolla Cross is the more powerful version of the engines offered in the Corolla. In fact, the same and only engine offered in the hatchback, which is the 169 horsepower 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, naturally aspirated, naturally. And well, in this thing, mated with a CVT with a trick. It actually has a real first gear. So when you take off from a dead stop, you don't get that, rubbery, marshmallowy throttle response that you typically, or at least I typically associate with CVT transmission. The only somewhat downside, as I'm slowed down by a semi trying to do a right-hand turn, the only downside to that is occasionally when you come back down to a full stop, and I've only experienced it maybe 2, max 3 times, is that if you're too quick back on the throttle, there's kind of a jerk, which is something you don't normally get in a CVT. So I'm not saying it's a trade-off, but I'm saying you get a little bit of both with the Corolla Cross and the CVT. The thing with the Corolla Cross, now I haven't checked the exact numbers, as I said, we're kind of trying to power through the review of this thing. I'll do another video in a few months when I get it for a full week and I have more time with it. Is that, well, see, the 169 horsepower 2-liter, even with the manual transmission in the Corolla hatchback, those are bigger numbers, but the performance just isn't there. So you add the extra weight because of the size of the vehicle, the extra weight and drag from the rear differential for the all-wheel drive system, and you end up with a vehicle that is kind of slow-ish. Now, as I mentioned, that's the potholes. It's not the chassis. It's not the platform of this thing, because it's really comfortable. As I mentioned, the roads are really bad, and if memory serves it, they're about to get a little bit worse right here. Yeah, so it's the power. It's not that it's down on power, it's just that it's adequate. So if you factor in, say, 3 of your best friends and some gear in the trunk, you might get on the throttle more often than you think, which leads me to the one kind of downside to this vehicle. Now, Toyota says you can average maybe about 8 liters per 100 kilometers in mixed driving with the Corolla Cross. Now, we're not being 100. Yeah, that was so beautiful. Wow. These new platforms are just exceptional. I'm not saying that we're being aggressive with it, but we're driving it. And there's nothing we can do. We can't get anywhere near below 9.5 liters per 100 kilometers, which is kind of unfortunate, but this has mid-sized sedan space, has the advantage of all-wheel drive. It's a little bit higher up off the ground. It also has winter tires on it at the moment, Blizzaks if I'm not mistaken. So, train tracks. Oh no, they've been paved over. That's strange. Anyhow, so that's the downside. If you're really efficient and you're good with the throttle and patient with other people around you on the road, unlike me, for example, you might get your 8 liters per 100 kilometers, but I think in the real world it'll be closer to 9. But the thing is, as you can expect with Toyotas, I know the hatchback lost the Consumer Reports recommended stamp of approval, but even though they share a lot, the two, there's no doubt in my mind that this is still probably one of the smartest, safest, most efficient. There are no guarantees in the car business, but this is damn near close. And now you have all-wheel drive, and you have extra room both for your head, your legs, your feet, and and more trunk space. When Toyota introduces a hybrid version of this thing, it may very well become the smartest, most reasonable petrol-powered vehicle money can buy. Yeah, this thing is unbelievable, and if you're shopping for it, I mean, just do a beeline right to your Toyota dealer. Don't hesitate. Don't look at a CX-3 or a Trailblazer or anything else, or an HRV. Just get a Corolla Cross, and you'll never wonder if you made the right choice. This thing it's comfortable, it's efficient, it's all that. I just said all that. This thing is great.